True.
And one of the things I remember was I got to know you was your, other than being a wonderful individual and a great person to be able to share the floor with, but your honesty and your directness. Well, I think it was a real asset. And a very
There are some people across there basically who.
No, I think it was a very timely hire for somebody like you, who, you know, you helped us put in context and kind of sense of future over things that we didn't have at that time with regard to the finances and management reports and things like that. So what I've been asking people is to give me a sense of not only what drew them to All Hallows, maybe was just simply a job, but what is it that influenced you or caught your attention about the place, other than the red? And what is it that caught you, kept you here, influenced how you interacted with others in the institution? Because I know you had some strong feelings about the values and
Yes.
how you spoke to them as we wrestled with some pretty important issues.
I think I started here January 2013. I had been unemployed for 3 years, 3 months. I suppose I had gone through a process of having to downsize a business that I had been intimate to growing. And I grieved. I had the financial wherewithal, but I grieved and wallowed in that for beyond my time. And then I got a call from PwC, or the auditors here, and they said that they had one of their longest standing clients, which was All Hallows. It was back to Cooper's and Librand. So probably back to about 1870 or so, that they had been coming in and providing audit accounts for All Hallows College. And that All Hallows was experiencing a number of financial challenges, and that maybe there was something there that would appeal to me. And I came here for an interview. I think it was for maybe 11 o'clock or so, and the person before me was running way over, so I was left for an hour out in the coffee dock, and I sat there and I was very nervous, and I was just struck by seeing the students and staff interacting in the coffee dock. People coming across and saying, "Are you all right? Would you like a chocolate? Can I get you some coffee?" And they weren't leaving me behind. And in that time, I sort of calmed down. I just got a sense of the place and said, you know, this is good. This is nice. And then the interview, I think, if I remember, had 6 people on the interview panel. And I was asked a question as to what did I think about the numbers of people that were on the interview panel. And all I could respond, well, that was actually part of the problem, but it part of it said that there was a lot of different vested interests in All Hallows. And I think that day I really enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the challenge of the interview. And I got a sense that there were people and that this was an environment whereby I could come and make a difference. And I started in January 2013. I came into my predecessor was Ian Baker, and with Sheila. And I suppose I had heard the theory of manual accounting records before, but I'd never actually seen them. And I came in to be presented with ledgers and a bit of computer system which dated back to the late 1980s. And I was just going. So my first task was to go and to put in place a modern that wasn't me, system called Sage. That was John Hans Cup. And that I spent maybe 2 or 3 months delving back through the records to make sure they were up on the system, but learning about the financial transactions and how paper flows, and I suppose trying to bring, initially to my mind, to be able to get to a point of transparency, to understand where the costs were, what was contributing, what wasn't, and trying to produce consistent financial information that all the information that you can see here would be done to the penny. You know, my predecessor did a fantastic job, and you know, I would say they're a very good financial controller, but I regard myself as a financial director. And the difference I would see is I can do reporting of information, but my bit is more taking the number and trying to understand where did that number come from and how can that number be influenced. Where I think what was here beforehand was the job was to report the information, hand it over and leave it to others. And that became pretty clear very quickly that we had some major financial challenges. And from that, we really developed, this was a partnership with yourself, with Ronan, Mary, and Pat. This was a two-pronged approach. In the background, I knew Plan B was wind down. And what led to the whole Ashling program was, I suppose, cost control, which is what I identified. People took, 7.5% or 10% pay cuts. Not very generous salaries in the first place. So that was the cost control part, which we delivered, and people were prepared to back in behind that. The next part was academic accreditation, trying to get additional, because I identified that the size of the campus here, we needed 2 or 3 times the amount of students we had to make the place pay. But those students weren't going to come for our existing products. They weren't prepared to pay for a BA degree in theology. So we needed to offer a wider range of products that people were prepared to come and pay for, because it became obvious we couldn't get that money from the government. And you had QQI being rolled out at the time, which was the quality standards people. And I suppose in hindsight, it became, we set out a budget for 2013-14, and in that we set out milestones, cost control, which we delivered, and then from an academic qualification or accreditation point of view, it became clear we weren't going to deliver that. And then the last part of that process was to look at the fundraising side. And we went through the process of recruiting CCS, and they set off to do a comprehensive review of the potential donor base to help fund All Hallows. But really the outcome from that, and that took all the way through to spring 2014, was that money was potentially available, but it would take maybe 8 or 9 years to get to a point whereby there would be sufficient income coming from the giving side to be able to sustain. But when I added the numbers up, it was clear we were going to run out of cash in September, October 2014. So that side, and then we had the Kennedy letters, which are probably but they were, I suppose our back was to the wall, and I think that stage I helped hold the mirror up to people and say, this is the picture, warts and all. And the reality was, I think we knew that Plan B was the most likely outcome. But I suppose the bravery of Pat, the bravery of the team, to turn over every stone, do everything we possibly could to try and sustain All Hallows. And I suppose that led, when we weren't getting the fundraising side, and we weren't getting the accreditation side, but we had delivered the cost saving side. But that took us around to May 2014, and the decision to wind down the college.
Tell me how, as you, through your own thinking and working with the team, how did the mission of the place and, you know, particularly as we were starting to talk about the wind down, the legacy, the strong legacy of Will Hallows, how did mission and legacy play in your mind with, you know, the important issues certainly at the end of deciding to close down or the wind down, you know, shutting down an institution like this is huge and significant. I know you've been through it for profit, but I guess the mission to start with and its influence in your work. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, well, I was fortunate to be put on a Vincentian training week in France. That was in May. Yeah. And Mary was leading it at the time. And it was an amazing experience for me to go and to share with, you know, people who were dealing with people with leprosy in Ethiopia, people who were, you know, parishes was in a rubbish dump in the middle of the Philippines, somewhere near Manila. And just to view the wider Vincentian world, and I suppose these really sort of people who were self-effacing but were out there doing amazing things. And for me, coming from what was a commercial world to seeing, you know, the joy they brought, the money wasn't important to them, but it was people that was important. And that had, you know, that really brought home to me. It probably helped give me the language to be able to go back and to some arms and to make it made it harder for me to be pushed away in terms of bringing the numbers. But that was a start for me in terms of sort of trying to think in a more holistic way and thinking about society and thinking about, you know, people and where their roles were in society, and then coming back to All Hallows and looking at the student base that we had and looking at the academics that were here and the staff, some of them here 20, 25 years with a smile on their face. You know, they're not well remunerated by commercial standards, but people who came and were proud to be part of an historic institution and, you know, came with a smile every day. And to be part of that and to feel that I had something to contribute to that and to feel that, you know, acknowledge I really like helping people, you know, and bringing my financial knowledge to support experts in the different fields and trying to help them grapple with that reality and make the intangible, sometimes for some the financial numbers, tangible, something that they can actually relate to. And
is that an entirely different experience than you had in your corporate or commercial?
No, actually. No. I mean, for quite similar. I think if you take a salesperson, they are dominant individuals who are experts in their field, but they're not necessarily very well rounded. If you take an academic, they are dominant individuals, expert in their fields, and, you know, so they're not actually unlike as personalities. Just the people I dealt with would, from an academic point of view, wouldn't have had great education, but they were well schooled in life. They were people I was dealing with where, you know, the one out of 1,000 who maybe left school early, started off on the shop floor and worked their way to the top of their organisation, and they were driven, almost like driven people. Yeah. And it was in the land of the blind, the man with the one eye was king. When you came here, you were dealing with very smart people, and that meant you had to change your language. That meant you had to think, put yourself into their shoes and trying to think about, you know, how do they perceive this? And when you're talking about change, when you're, you know, ultimately showing people that this is going to end, and how can you help people grapple with that? How can you help make that tangible for them, that they can then start to plan and start to say, well, if I'm not happy with that, what can I do to change it? And I suppose that's, if I was in All Hallows 4 years before, I probably would have been very frustrated. And I look at it and say, I almost need a crisis for people to be willing to change. And that's my personality. I like that fast moving side. But if I was in I regret not being in All Hallows maybe 4 years before. Maybe we could have found a way.
Yeah.
So you go back to that regret. But the realities of the institution is religious orders are a bit like a vitamin C tablet. They have been gradually put the water in you put the water in the glass and it bubbles on the surface, and what you see, the tablet in front of you, disappearing. And you're, at the end of the day, you're left with a suspension. And I suppose our customer base, which would have been religious institutions coming to hire, they have all been on the retreat for some time. There is a market for theology. There is a market for the type of products All Hallows had, but it's a narrow market. It's a niche market, and to pay for the buildings, I could see the sliding line of reaching zero in terms of the cash pile they're burning through. And in doing the deal with DCU, they're going to spend 25 million plus on the buildings to give life to the campus for the next 150 years. And the trust didn't have that type of capital. And Ireland, at the end of the day, is a small place. There was only so many people who can maybe do the products we had. And that meant there was this imbalance in the economics. That meant some things in how we operated weren't as efficient as they might be, but people had goodwill. But overall, you needed a lot more students to pay the bills, and it was very hard.
In terms of our product, as you refer to it, is the product tired, or was it out of step with where the HEA was looking for a third level to go? What's your assessment of what, I guess, more of what we wanted to offer, not necessarily what we were offering, because we were talking about changes and what to offer?
Well, to me, and to be very, I don't mean to be critical of what was here, but when I go back to the statement, I think about, from the whole review process that Pat did when he came in about what our values and what ideals were. It was, to me, that statement, I can't remember the words, but it was from the point of view of this is what All Hallows did. But it wasn't from the customer's point of view. Okay? It didn't have, it was talking more from an academic point of view, saying, this is what our values, this is what we do. It wasn't turning around from the customer's point of view, saying this is what they need. And I think that's a academic, at the third level piece. But the modern world is more, you have to be looking at your customer, whether it's Lean, Six Sigma, whatever it is, it's looking at your customer and looking at the world from their perspective, as opposed to the actual organization or the institution. So I would disagree with that, but that's just my business view of it. And so I don't know if I'm answering the question.
With that, I guess the follow-up for me would be then what students needed, and they're not always in the best position to know what they need, but I think what the market would need, and that All Hallows could help contribute to or meet. Do you have any thoughts on where All Hallows fits within that market-driven?
Well, I think, again, All Hallows was a seminary, and it made its mind up, because it had some great academics, it made its mind up that it was going to convert itself into a third level. But the mindset of the seminary was still there. And I think that flowed into the products that we had. So, the world, there was a, in the educational world, third level world, the world has moved to 3-year BA degrees. And All Hallows was saying, no, no, we're still happy with our 4-year degree. And you know, that type of thing is more that it's, again, if you're looking at it from what is best for All Hallows, as opposed to what the customer wants. Okay, so that, I think from a strategic point of view, if you're looking at the academic products, that was a problem. You need to look at from the customer's perspective as opposed to what suits the institution. And in the wider, the larger big box, third level, you know, they can fire a shotgun and, you know, they're there and people come in. But for us as a niche provider, we really needed to look at who was the customer base, what were they prepared to pay, and, you know, what was the type of product that was really going to appeal to them. And I think we approached it from what was suited the institution, and, you know, rather than actually tailoring from that point of view. So that's, if I was criticising, that's
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think the other part of it, where does the mission come in terms of competing in a environment that is more, Andrew raised it in terms of a more career-oriented, probably more professional skill level. Where does a mission-based institution like Hallows, would it fit the future priority in this country?
I think in looking at All Hallows, you have to look at Ireland Inc. And Ireland Inc., we think we're a we're a first world economy. The reality is we're a second world economy. And that means we only have 4.5 million people in the country. And of that, there are less than 2 million that are actually taxpayers or in employment. And of that, there are actually probably only 200,000 or 300,000 of those people actually paying tax net. So there's a small proportion of people who are actually paying for everything. And that means that our civil service and our politicians, it's almost they're engaged in a let's pretend exercise. And when it comes to funding our health system or our education system, it's like, you know, a Wild West town where you put out a 3-story front and the reality is a 1-story shack out the back. And that comes to, we call it a yellow pack education system, or one size fits all, when it doesn't. Or a light switch on, light switch off, there's no dimmer switch. And All Hallows provided for a limited people that are at the margins a second chance, people who wouldn't survive in UCD or Trinity or DCU. We provided, like, our, you know, where Trinity would, or UCD or DCU would provide maybe one academic to almost 25, 30 students. We, at some places, had an academic for 6 students or an academic for 5 students. And, you know, that was uneconomic from a financial point of view, but that was the level of service, that was the level of the passion of the people, the academic staff that were here, that they were prepared to do something totally against what the economics were, because they believed in the subject and they believed in what they were doing. That was a very special thing. But in Ireland Inc. point of view, you know, it didn't fit that mold.
Yeah.
And if you go back to All Hallows but I think that goes back to All Hallows as a seminary, and it was a failure maybe to understand that strategic piece. So therefore, as a seminary, a seminarian came in, they were being sponsored by the diocese out in Sacramento or in Perth. The money came in and they were paid for. But in moving over to a third level piece, you're into now a volume game, or you're into a niche provider game. And we ended up, to my mind, when I look at the academic products that we had, there were some very good programs, but when push came to shove and we were trying to do the fundraising side, the question was, what did All Hallows do better than anybody else? And that was the truth was we had a number of programs that were all great ideas, and some of the MA programs were very successful, but there wasn't one thing you could point to and say we're the world best at this.
Well, the other part of that dilemma was the lack of the sense of philanthropy in Ireland, which
Yes.
is a reality. And it was interesting in my conversation with Jim Ellis, who some of you know was on the finance committee, and the tension he had with deficit spending as a budgetary process, and yet his belief, and whether it was going to be a going concern even in 12 months from that point, and at the same point his passion about Hallows and its contribution in the past and potential contribution in the future. And he was an interesting person to talk to as a finance person like you, who saw that it was unsustainable. And yet it was important to sustain, and the opportunities to turn it around and to make it a sustainable business were so limited. And for a variety of reasons, some of which you mentioned. I think that was a difficult reality for many of us to deal with. I thought what you brought to it was that transparency that you talked about, that those level of management reporting with analytics, not just here are the numbers that don't work. But I thought you gave us the kind of analytical management reports that helped us really to struggle with the challenges that were there. I think that was your contribution. I also thought that your contribution was driven by what you had come to learn about Hallows' mission and the impact that it could have on students and did have on students. And I listened to that, or I shouldn't say I listened to it, I experienced it as you worked with students who were in arrears in their accounts, and how you worked so hard to try and make it affordable or reasonable for them to attend. And yet I thought you were honest with students who just weren't going to make it here, and why continue to incur more debt. So I just think you did a very fine job of balancing all of that, and I think it was your own personal values, and I think what Hallows brought to you as
I wouldn't have described myself as being a particularly religious person, but coming here, I was raised a Catholic all the way through, and it really comes down to treat other people the way you want to be treated yourself. And Hallows, I found an environment whereby I could both give respect and feel respected.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I came and I knew I had something to contribute on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I've been privileged. I feel I've done my best work here, and I've been privileged to work with some amazing people, especially on the wind down management team, Gillian, Andrew, Mary, and laterally I've basically been working on the project with Carol Ann in terms of the archives and the exhibition space, the graveyard, the garden, and again, and even Anna with the archives, and having that opportunity to delve back into the history. And I've become so conscious of, or I think I have, of, you go out to the back of senior house and you see the steps, and you see what the steps are worn, and you just sit there and imagine 1930s and guys running up and down to their rooms because the bells are rung and they're late for whatever, and trying to capture some of that. And I suppose in Jubilee days, it's really struck me as these men have gone out into the world, and they were told they had a vocation. They came from the boarding school. They came to All Hallows and locked behind doors for 7 years, ordained, given a ticket, and sent off to somewhere. They were 25-year-olds. They didn't know themselves, didn't know the world, and they were thrown out to some parish somewhere and sink or swim. And you couldn't but have admiration for what they've done. And at the same time, coming into contact with the ALBA students, or Renewal for Mission students, or the BA students, or the Master students, and seeing their passion and their zeal for, to change their lives. And I'm conscious